Hello there, everybody. This is Tom Akazi007, and welcome to a review of Until Then. I don't really do these at all. Normally, if I give my take on a game or a score or anything like that, my final thoughts are normally immediately right after beating it. I just do it clear, concise, quick, normally leave a bunch of stuff out. For this, I wanted to do something different, which is basically all of that, but it's longer. Right? I'm going to forget so many things, I'm going to leave so many things out. But for Until Then, I wanted to at least talk about it more than I would have if I just rambled at the end of the last part. So instead, I'm going to ramble in an entirely different video. So this will be horrendously jank. This will almost follow no pattern or no script. I just really want to talk about it, right? So without further ado, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Starting at the beginning. When I first wanted to play Until Then, I kind of just saw it, right? I didn't have this grand idea for it or this crazy setup where I knew everything about the game and I just wanted to go through it and experience it but then put twists or edits in. No, I went in almost entirely blind. The thing that really drew me to it was the pixel art and just the overwhelmingly positive response from the community. I never once saw anybody talk bad about this game, which made me very much so want to play it and experience it. And with that being said, I kind of took my time getting to it. The first part that I uploaded was over a year ago. It took me a long time to kind of settle into it, and there were other things that I was doing, but I always wanted to play it, so I always left it on the back burner until I finally decided to just give it a go. And funny enough, it was one of the first games that I recorded on PC instead of recording on console. I don't know why I did that. I just wanted to learn and try and go into it and figure things out. So there's a lot different from the very first part of Until Then to the last part of Until Then. Audio mixing, just capture, how I, threw in filters, this, that, and the other thing, and just trying to get it right. And even at the end, I never truly got it right. But that's all about me. We need to talk about the actual game. That was just my process going into it and me rambling because that's going to be 90% of this video. But right away when I started playing, I was enamored. The sounds were so different. They were so crisp and just there was intent behind it. It wasn't just background noise. It was putting me in the shoes of the character that I knew I was going to be following around. Mark Borja. And throughout it, it was just such an experience to get to know this character. At first, when I played the game, I was the world's #1 Mark Borja hater. I did not like his characterization at all. He felt very much selfish, he felt very much distant, and the way that he dealt with one of my favorite characters in the game, who is his best friend, which we will get into later, it just irked me, right? It made me feel uneasy. Just playing the character and learning more about him, I wasn't so fully invested in playing as him because I couldn't fully see myself in him and I couldn't fully understand his reasonings for being the way that he was. But even with that, I could tell that there was a reason for what they were doing with him. I could tell that there was a reason why Mark was always so distant, why he was always so willing to almost give up or just move away from things that didn't seriously matter to him, or maybe they did matter to him, and he just kind of left it on the sidelines because it was easier that way. The game, well, in the beginning, it very much sets up that an incident is going to occur. When you load the game, you get that kind of that poem with the music and the understanding of something isn't right. I always held on to that while playing this game. But even like going through my first initial playthrough of it, I almost thought it was a red herring. I almost believed that there was nothing supernatural or some crazy twist that was coming up. I really thought this was a journey through Mark's perspective, let's say. I didn't really feel like I was experiencing a game in the beginning, which this game is very much a visual novel. You very much just read and go through like your experiences with the characters and their interactions and everything. But this one specifically, especially in the first part, I almost felt like none of my choices had any impact on what was happening, and it almost didn't matter what I was doing. And to an extent, that may be true with most choice-based games, quote-unquote, and most games that are a visual novel where you have to follow it a certain way in order to, fully grasp what's happening, right? It has to be a straight and narrow path with only a few little breadcrumbs and like tidbits of, hey, your interaction here still matters, you are still playing the game. So for the longest time, even when I met the other characters, even though I was like going through the motions and like choosing choices for Mark, I never truly felt like I was experiencing what the game had to offer or what it could be. And that's how it got me. And that's why I kept playing. That's why I wanted to keep playing. I wanted to understand more about the game and the characters. Even just from the first playthrough, even with Mark like kind of being a little odd and kind of a little distant, kind of a bit unreadable for me, I wanted to keep pushing through because I knew there was something special. I knew there was something else beyond just this story that it was presenting to me. And without going too far into the other, scenarios and, even the ending, I almost thought the story would be better without a twist. The story would be better without any supernatural stuff happening, or even, any video game, action being taken. And boy, was I wrong about that. You'll hear me contradict myself, throughout the entire playthrough about my feelings towards certain characters, towards Mark and everything, because the game does eventually hit you with a twist. The game does eventually just kind of nail you with the, oh, by the way, things aren't as they seem. And there's so many hints to that throughout that I would call them out and, make jokes or even be like, whatever, what if this happened? I almost never got it right. I was close a few times, but I never got it completely right, which made me ecstatic to play more. The first time you really go through and you get to see Mark interact with these characters, it felt final. It felt like this is the way that these characters are and that you needed to interact with them, but that was wrong. That was just them in certain scenarios the entire time. So when you meet my favorite character in the entire game, the shining bright light that carries this game to greatness, Catherine Joyce Portillo, otherwise known as Kathy. It is monumental, and you don't really realize it. Kath fits in so well with this game's narrative, and I'm not even talking about the overall narrative. I'm just talking about, the tone that it sets and what the game is going to present to you and what it is going to give to you, which is heavily emotional character interactions and meaning behind those interactions that will then tie into the overall plot and all the characters' traumas and grief and everything that they've been through. And I think Kath, out of everyone in this game, more than Mark, more than Nicole, more than Riddell, more than Louise, Kath embodies that to a T. Kath is a character that you see and you believe you know everything about because we're getting it through Mark's perspective. At first, Kath is just the best friend, and that's it. It's a title. It doesn't really mean anything to me as a player. I'm just supposed to interact with this individual, blah, 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 this individual, and accept that it is Mark's best friend, right? That Kathy, this individual, this, character, what they are and what they represent, it's Mark's best friend. I cannot tell you how worried I was throughout the entire first playthrough for Kath. Whenever Mark left her alone, whenever Mark kind of moved away from topics about her to focus on himself, and also, to be fair, Nicole, who I'll talk about a little bit, and I'll probably talk about Nicole next. It was enthralling for me to feel connected to Kath more than Mark did by the end of that first story. That first, go through really made me feel sorry for Kath in a way that I didn't think the game would really wrap back around to, and yet it did. So just going off a little bit, in the beginning, it's just so scary. I was so worried for Kath the entire time and what the game might do to her because of Mark's negligence, or not because of Mark's negligence, but what would happen to her, and then Mark's negligence would then be multiplied, would then be shown as this is what happens when you don't necessarily pay attention to all the clues. And they hit Mark with that so hard. And at first I was like, yeah, Mark deserves, whatever, Mark. And by the end of it, all I could do was feel sorry for Mark, almost as much as I felt sorry for Kath. What Mark went through in order to finally make amends for never paying attention, it's a lot. It's very much a lot. I never truly expected the game to really hammer home a point that I had been making that was originally a gripe, which is I was like, we're leaving Kath alone too much. I don't really like that the game is taking away my ability, my autonomy as a player for me playing this game to basically have no choices but to ignore Kath, right? But at the end, that's what mattered, was the inability to take action, right? And that wrapped itself up when inevitably Mark does take action. In the moment that he needs to, that's when it matters. Not after. The game doesn't care about after. The game cares about now. The game teaches you that now is a gift. The game teaches you that while the future is scary, and while the past may try to define you, the point is now. The point is that you keep going. The point is that you don't give up. The point is that there are people that need you just as much as you need yourself and need them. Mark represents that, and Kath helps him represent that. So, while I was talking about Kath a lot, I also want to talk about Nicole, and how good of a character Nicole is as well. All these characters feel amazing by the end of the game. However, Nicole really stood out in the beginning. She was, in a way, Mark's, not opposite, but it's like they're two nails that go into a fixture together. One can't exist without the other, it's just one's on the left side of the fixture, one's on the right side of the fixture in order to hold it up together. Nicole very much felt like she was the thing that could hold it all together. And the game presented her like that for a reason. With Mark going through these things that he didn't fully understand, his process of dealing with his own trauma and even figuring it out, because you as the player don't know what the character Mark is going through. It hides it from you just as well as he hides it from everybody else in his life. And Nicole was that first thing that really pushed back, that made it different. Nicole was so against Mark that in a way she was helping him. Whereas he wasn't willing to open up to anybody else and she necessarily wasn't either, she opened up to him first. I remember the carnival. I remember Mark's like traumas like catching up to him. And that moment when you see Nicole and you play these carnival games, whereas before the carnival games, like everything was shaky and everything was weird and you couldn't necessarily like deal with it. All of a sudden you play those same games, or at least similar ones, with Nicole, and the game is so steady, the music creeps in and everything just feels right, and Mark is able to do it. It really makes it seem like she is the thing that can fix everything. And I even talked about that in game. I said, I love how good they are for each other, but you can't treat someone like they are the solution to all of your issues. And that is one of the things that the game touched on, is Nicole really was the solution, right? Everything that Mark was dealing with kind of went away when Nicole was there. But you can't just bury it, right? And that was so apparent in Nicole's actions, or not her actions, in her presence, because Mark would abandon everything for her. I felt so bad for Kath when she was left at the fair. And she was waiting for Mark, and she was waiting for Adele, who I'll talk about right after this. She just wanted one last fun time with her friends, and all she got was left behind when Mark just casually chose Nicole over her. It hurt so much, and I don't mean in a romantic sense. I never really thought of Mark and Kath ever being like romantically involved, other than in like one sentence during one of the I can't remember exactly when it was. I think she was like, I have something important to tell you, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, like, wait, is that the twist? Is that like what's gonna happen? But then once I like, realized what was actually happening, I was like, oh no, and honestly, like, thank God, because like, knowing what I know like now about beating the game, it's like, no, it was always platonic between them, and I think that's perfect. I think it's perfect the way that their relationship is explored and shown, right? But it hurts so much knowing that this individual that Mark calls his best friend almost matters less to him than his own well-being and his own ability to chase after the thing that makes him feel comfortable and safe against his issues that he refuses to explore otherwise, right? And that thing was Nicole. I think Nicole is such an amazing character in the way that she's kind of forced into that role, and she doesn't even necessarily know it herself. And we don't know everything about Nicole either. You get just little hints that Mark picks up, that he latches onto as if he knows her and he knows exactly what she needs, when in reality she didn't even know what she needed herself. Now, we're going to go back a little bit before I continue talking about Nicole, because I'm kind of just going through like the beginning all the way through to the end with a little bit of, just rambling. I'm just rambling. I'm just having fun at this point. I just want to talk about the game, man. Riddell. So again, in the beginning, you're introduced to Riddell as like the third, individual of the friend group, the like friend, right? Other than Kath, for Mark. Like, if there's like, the big three of this game, I don't even think Riddell would be in it, honestly, but that's what he's presented as. It is Mark, Kath, and Riddell. They're all in a group together and they all hang out and they're best friends. When you are shown Riddell for the first time, he's almost pompous. He's almost self-absorbed. In fact, he is. All he seems to care about throughout the entirety of the first part of the story is his movie. And everybody is so supportive of him. Everybody wants this movie to happen. And Riddell himself is so dead set on making it happen that it's already like in the works, that he's already ready to go. And it is shown multiple times that he just ignores and he avoids and he doesn't interact. with almost anyone, other than when the movie is being talked about. He'll pick up the phone to talk to the people that he's working with. He will go out of his way to ignore and pass by people to continue talking about the movie, to continue talking on his phone, to continue working. To the point where I almost felt like I didn't want him around as a player because it was just annoying. All he did was talk about that movie. And then when Kath, again at the fair, just wanted one last final time to hang out with everybody, I didn't expect Riddell to show up. And then when he did, I was like, well, at least he's here. At least he's trying, right? Well, while Mark is going through all of his stuff and Riddell is yeah, still talking about the movie and still dealing with business, but at least he's here. That all went away during that one scene when they're all talking about being there, right? And Riddell is like, oh, well, this is my last night, and then I'm going to go make that movie. And guess what? His filming partner shows up. They talk for a bit. And the last thing that he does to his apparent best friends that he is leaving to go make this movie is he essentially just turns around and says, well, it was fun. Bye. And then he leaves, and you do not see him until the end of that first story. That first playthrough. You do not hear from Riddell again. He is gone out of the story as if he doesn't matter. Which is crazy. I despised that instance of Riddell. That playthrough made me not like Riddell. I was always harsh on Mark. Riddell, I actually felt like was a scumbag in the beginning of the game. And his theme is so important of latching on to something and not letting it go, to the point where you are inadvertently hurting those around you. It is such an important first lesson to learn for the game. I think Riddell's character, while annoying and while not perfect, he's literally built to be, I think, hated in the beginning. Maybe not fully hated, but you don't agree with what he's doing, right? And I think it's such a good way to show the early themes of what will happen later. Now, if we're still on the that circus arc in the beginning, and we move forward a little bit, we can talk about the other character who's kind of introduced, which I guess I should have talked about this individual first, actually, Ryan Soriano. Ryan is a character that I feel like I can just talk about everything about him all at once. At first, you're introduced to him, you're just doing a project with him, he opens his laptop, you guys get a crunch, you make the presentation slides with him, and while they're not perfect, they work, right? And you guys are able to talk your way out of it, talk about, utter nonsense and whatever, and you get through it. And through Ryan, you are introduced to him being on the basketball team, you're introduced to him at the fair later, you are introduced to him knowing Kath's original crush, an individual by the name of Jaggy, that doesn't work out for her, and that everybody teases her on and this, that, and the other thing, because it's kind of the only time that Kath has really shown interest like that, other than in another character that I'll talk about after this. I'm going to say that a lot. Ryan is so chill. He's such a background character, but he's more important than that. He's not a side character either. He's just part of this world, and he's part of these characters' perspectives of the time that they spend here at the school and at other events, because he's a constant. You know him. When you see him, you can recognize him, which, going past, again, just talking with everything about him, makes it hurt almost when he disappears. When you start learning that people aren't just vanishing for no reason and going missing because of this, that, or the other thing, you realize how impactful it is to lose these people who were part of that world. Originally, Ryan didn't disappear. Ryan worked with you on the slides. Ryan was there for you. Ryan had your back. Ryan would talk up for you. Ryan would be part of the group. He'd push you around and stuff when you were asleep. He'd try and do this, that, and the other thing. He was there. So when he vanishes, and you no longer have that individual in your world with you anymore, it is so impactful. It is so sad to realize that he's not there, that all the gaps that need to be filled because he isn't there can't be. It is very much a wake-up call to how much a person's life affects the world around them. Ryan is such an amazing example of that, and at the end of the game, when it just shows him just, playing basketball with his friends, it is what he was meant to do. It is where he is meant to be. He was never meant to vanish. He needed to be there, right? In order for the world to feel complete. And he's such a good example of that. He's such an amazing example of the world needs him. The world misses him when he's not there. And it's such a it's just so good, right, to realize that. To even just talk about it right now, and for me to realize like how impactful it was, honestly, is such a treat. This dissection is more fun for me than it's probably fun for anybody else, but again, I just really wanted to talk about this game. So, moving on from Ryan, we have another character that's introduced at the beginning, Louise. Now, Louise is an interesting character. She's shown as kind of a love interest for Mark and Kath. Kath is just kind of infatuated with her for the sake of being infatuated with her, while Mark senses like more of a connection with her. And that connection comes from not only like being classmates and from like talking with her and like from, oh, we barely got the slides done, but she was impressed. Oh boy, time to make my move. There's something else, and it occurs when you follow her to her chess game, and it is immediately like friendly. It is immediately inviting, and you kind of pin Louise with the, oh, this person is my friend and this person will help me, right? You are aware that Louise, in the sense that you know her, has it all together. This is somebody who's in charge, who won't let you down, who will kind of always be there when you need her to be there. It is set up in a way that later on, when she changes entirely, it's almost frightening. It's almost as though you truly never knew her, or she's changed. Now, at this chess tournament, you're introduced to one of my favorite characters, but unfortunately a character that I really felt was kind of left behind in comparison to the others. You're introduced to Sophia Rubio, Luis's best friend. Sophia has a grandmother who is affected by a little thing known as the ruling. When I played my first playthrough of this game, I didn't realize how important reading the phone and like the news articles and all this stuff was. When they were talking about the ruination, I thought they were talking about some like crazy, like, oh my god, it's like the Earth's core is like cracking and exploding and like the magma is going to come out and the aliens are going to invade. And that never happened. I always thought it was like some like mysterious thing that I was never supposed to know about until they kept talking about it. Until I realized I could read up on it. Until I realized it was an integral part of the world that I had missed out on without even realizing it. The ruling was essentially mass natural disasters all at once. Very impossible to happen. Science couldn't explain it. And it impacted the part of, Mark's world to the point that it was a constant reminder of the things that were going on. It was something unnatural in the world that just should never have happened. And it affected so many people's lives, even in the first part of the game, that you realize it is not only connected to Sophia because her grandma was impacted by the ruling to the point where she was in a coma. It also affects Nicole because she was front dead and center for it, basically. So going on with Sophia a bit more, she's just introduced as this like kind of jovial character who's kind of bubbly, who's always like a little like pushy, but in a good way. She's fun. She's energetic. She's willing to talk, but in a way that is almost overtly friendly. And I wish we got more of her. I really, really wish there was more Sophia Rubio in the game, because she's so fun. She's a fun character to be around, and she almost never changes when you do get those little tidbits of her at the end of the game. She is quite possibly, I think, one of the most missed opportunities of this game. Because she's not only connected to Louise, who I feel like changed so much and like varied in such a way that I wanted to know what happened to Sophia during those changes. But sometimes she was either just not present, like Louise didn't know who she was, or she wasn't in that part of the world during that playthrough, or at the end is just okay, right? Her story ending is basically like you see her hugging Louise and it's like, oh, well, the end. And the reason why I'm saying that is Sophia almost has no other connection to the story other than through her grandma to explain like how the trauma is connected, right? Through the ruination. And, you know, her saying, like, it's your fault, was Mark experiencing a different, like, essentially playthrough or time when he was struggling to connect the fact that losing essentially everything that mattered to him was, he felt like it was his fault, right? That is all Sophia's grandma kind of exists to do. And then after that, it is my favorite ship in the game, and I feel like it didn't get expanded upon at all, was at the end of the first story, Kathy and Sophia are dancing together at prom, and it is so cute, it is so adorable, and they look so happy. And it is accompanied by some of the saddest stuff that happens afterwards, that I'll talk about in a little bit again. It is her saying that she wants to try. It is her saying that she wants to do so many things, and it is shown with Sophia Rubio. Kathy and Sophia had the most potential to truly draw out like the full emotional potential of this game, and I feel like they kind of just threw Sophia away. Not really, right? I'm not saying they were just like, whatever. I do feel like it would have made the game so much better to see her more often and her reactions to some of these things. And honestly, again, like my favorite ship is like Kath and Sophia. To see Kath that happy was worth it after everything that she had been through. And that was me not even knowing the full story. That was just me thinking she deserved to be that happy with Sophia because Mark was essentially ignoring her, right? And Riddell was gone. So, you know. But to go back to Louise, another character that's connected to her too, who I again felt was a little off, was Luis's boyfriend, who is so kind of just left out of the story that I forgot his name. You hear it so much in the first playthrough, and then every subsequent other playthrough he's mentioned in passing, and man, I could not tell you his name if you put a gun to my head right now and said just say his first name. I couldn't do it. I could be like Sophia Rubio, Luis Orduña, Mark Borja, Riddell. I actually don't know his last name. Ryan Soriano, Catherine Joyce Portillo. Like, I could keep going with some of those. But I won't. Nicole Oxamana. But I won't. Because I almost feel like he was just so there and then not. In comparison to some of the other characters that really impacted the story, I feel like he didn't. I feel like he's almost in passing just to show Luis's changes again. Beyond that, though, Louise's connection to Mark is one of mystery. You're not fully sure why both of them are forgetting all of these things, and almost, they call it deja vu at first, where they're wondering if it has connections to the rain, where it's like they're forgetting things, or they're seeing things that they're like, but that didn't actually happen and I'm just messing up. Her whole thing was, it seemed that she thought certain days were raining and certain days weren't. And that's revealed later on to be the case because out of everyone in the world, it seems that only Mark, Nicole, and Louise can remember all of the past times that they've already experienced all the things that they are doing. Louise, though, can't fully remember she only gets flashes of it, of those memories. And if I had to talk about Louise, I would say that she's confusing, and she's confusing on purpose. She constantly tries to give you the right answers for what's happening all the time. She's constantly walking back and forth saying, oh, like, if this equals this, then it should equal this, even if it's impossible. She always kind of throws out a solution to the problem that turns out to not be what needs to be done, because she's presented as the person who knows everything. You trust her as the person who'd have all the answers. But in reality, she just doesn't. Because what's happening is beyond what anyone could possibly understand. She gets close a few times, just like I do with my theories about the game, but I never fully landed, and I don't think she fully landed either. They do explain it as her eventually like grasping it and figuring out like, oh, there's like kind of like fault lines where whenever these occur, you know, people vanish. But it's not just people vanishing, it's almost memories, it's almost consequences of actions, right? Because I'll explain later on what those consequences of those actions are and why the first playthrough is so important. Why I'm still kind of on the first playthrough is it's so integral to everything else that happens later. The first part of the game is so slow. It introduces you to so many things that, again, I was almost convinced like the game would just end like normally. Like that's it. Like there is no anything supernatural or whatever. The ruination was like a red herring. It's just a terrible event that happened. All these like memory like issues and deja vu are just like brought up because of Mark's trauma and Mark's like suppressed like stress and this, that, and the other thing. And one other thing that I wanted to talk about before we really get into like the meat and the bones of the plot is the trauma that is shown in the first playthrough, which is very much where the meat and the bones of the plot takes place, but it's not the same every single time, but there are like constants and there are like reasonings for it. Thematically, I want to talk more about like the themes and like the like connection to the characters that the trauma that is presented for Mark and Kath and Nicole and even Louise, like all of those, and even Riddell, like how all of those things affect them through the playthroughs, not the overall plot, but affect the characters. I want to talk about Mark's first, where the entire time again, I was like, get over it, Mark, like, oh my god, like, pay attention to Kath, you know, what's wrong with you? And then you figure out what is wrong with Mark. You figure out that he's not only like affected by trauma and he's not only a victim of the ruling, it still carries with him throughout this entire time because of how impactful it was. Because it wasn't just a whoops, that happened, you know, thing. It was a life-changing moment, and you never fully expect it to hit, at least I didn't fully expect it to hit as hard as it did. I had assumed the entire time, because Mark plays the piano, Mark, you know, at least like is starting to try a little bit harder because of Nicole and this, that, and the other thing, all these weird connections to things. And how he knows the song that he knows, which is later, but it is because of his mother. Mark's mother had been brought up so many times, and even his father would bring up his mother, right? Where it's like, oh, we're happy for you, we're excited for you, here's money for the month, right? Because Mark's parents work overseas. And it is presented in a way where you are meant to think like the dad and the mom are both overseas working on things. That all this time, like, you know, oh, we can't come and see you because of this, we can't come and see you because of that. And it's all told through text and email, because you're aware that the dad is sending these emails. And, you know, he talks for the mom, which should have been the first instance of like kind of a red, not a red herring, but like a red alarm going off in your head. Like, why isn't the mom sending things? But then Mark talks about her too, where it's like, oh, mom would want to see this. Maybe I should record my piano recital for mom and this, that, and the other thing. And you realize that Mark's mom has been gone for years. That during the ruination, her plane went down and it was never ever found. And all of these hints and all of these things leading up to it were so impactful because he cannot accept it. He can't. So even when he talks to his friends and like his peers and all these other people around him, he talks about his mother like she is still there. He talks about her like there is still hope that one day she'll just call or show up. He leads other people on almost in believing that she is still there and that he's okay. And that's what makes the moment when you go through the newspapers, right, underneath Mark's bed, and you pull out the one about the flight going down and how long she's been missing. And it's not Mark that forces it at your face with heavy emotion. It's not Mark bawling and saying, like, I miss my mom immediately. It is you reading the news that she has been gone the entire time, just like he would have. And it is so incredibly intense to realize that this is why Mark is the way that he is. Why he's so distant and why he needs to constantly feel like he needs to be okay through his own sources of, feeling happiness and feeling like okay, is because he doesn't feel okay anymore, is because he hasn't in a long time, because he has to keep forcing down this trauma. He has to keep it bottled up, or else he is forced to come to terms with the fact that his mother is gone. And his dad is the progenitor of this issue, where his dad also encourages Mark to talk about his wife, the dad, not saying, anyway, the weird mishmash of words on who I'm talking about here. But, Mark's dad is like, I want my wife to be alive, and I am willing to pretend that she shall be. And I talked about having hope, and it's a good thing to have hope, and I still stand by that. I still think it's a good thing to have hope and be like, maybe one day. But it's also bad to obsess over it to the point where it is affecting your life and it is drowning you in the idea that it can be fixed. It'll go back to the way that it was before. And life will work out exactly how I want it to. Because I want my mom back, right? When you are playing as Mark, you feel for him. You wish that his mother would come back and fix everything and just he would be happy again. But she won't. You as the player realize that very fast after reading all of that, and Mark opens up his emails and it shows all of the things that he sent that you've seen him send, and they failed to send, or they were sent to an email or a work email, and they've never been replied to. The entire time you thought that he was messaging his mom and that she was just busy or that she didn't care anymore or whatever, and you realize it's not the way that it was, not the way that you thought, that she is gone, and that Mark is torturing himself with sending messages to her in the hopes that one day she will just respond and that she'll be okay. But she's gone. It hurt so bad seeing those messages and knowing that Mark had been sending them off screen, when you don't see him all the time or during the transitions or whatever. Or even sometimes you do see him send stuff to his mom or type an email or look at an email. And it's so painful that the game built that up. And it is Mark's moment of realization himself, and he talks to Kath about it. And throughout it, it's almost beyond painful because it's not going to work out exactly the way that Mark thinks it does, right? Because before all that, we have to talk about another character. A character named Kate, who I'm just going to say is introduced as, oh, hey, it's another transfer student that came in alongside Nicole Loxamana, because Nicole transferred to the school, and that's how Mark first meets her. Nicole immediately meets Mark after Mark and Kath have a talk with Kate, and she's very distant, very pushy, doesn't show interest at all, despite Kath's best efforts. And Mark's kind of like casual nonchalantless. It's hard to explain the first meeting with Kate, where I didn't think she was important at all. But we'll talk about her in a little bit right after I talk about anything that I want to, because I kind of lost it. But through Kate, there comes a little bit of a connection with what I am going to talk about, which was Nicole and Mark had a fight before Mark came to terms with what happened to his mother. And it is the same exact thing that had happened to Mark. Nicole was a survivor of the ruination. However, her best friend Jake was not, but he wasn't just not a survivor of the ruination, I believe he was gone before the ruination. If I'm getting my timeline correct here. He disappeared. And what I think happened was at the end of the game, when you see like Jake's past, right? You get the timelines converging, and you get to see like a bit of what happened with Jake. Was his parents got divorced, and what I think happened was his dad took him away forever. I think that even before the ruination, they were gone, and something happened to them out there, or something didn't, and they're just lost to time and to distance. But Jake is gone. Nicole's best friend left without a word, essentially leaving her in the dark forever and leaving her with her own ideas of like loss, that it was her fault, self-hatred, and just missing somebody that made her life complete. Nicole made music for Jake that Mark somehow knows, and that is revealed that it was because his mom would go to recitals and she listened to a kid play, and she took that inspiration to kind of teach her son, right? Now, of course, there were other reasons why Mark knows that song so well, but that was the connection through them. And you realize, like, Mark and Nicole are almost the same in terms of their trauma. Both lost something so important to them that they do not know if they can continue living life without them, because all they know is living life with them. Nicole and Mark fight because Nicole brings Mark to the last known location that I believe she saw Jake. It was a house, a destroyed house, a dilapidated house, where it was dangerous to be in. Mark was kind of freaking out. And Nicole wanted him to understand that this was her, that she could not let Jake go, that she was telling him to his face that I need to find pieces, I need to find clues, I need to understand what happened to him, and I want to find him again. And she was showing Mark that she could never let that go. And Mark didn't tell her about his mother. So during that fight, it just kind of seems like he's impatient and he wants to get out of there, which I can understand. I was siding with Mark on that one, where it is like, yes, you're in a dilapidated building. You haven't exactly been super crystal clear about what your, feelings are. And it all culminated in the big fight that led Mark to feeling like he also has to move on, because he's a hypocrite for telling Nicole to move on if he himself can't either. It's a very powerful moment, and it's led up with, again, Mark confiding in Kath and telling her everything. So then, at the zenith point of it all, for the first, part of the story at least, is when they do go to prom. Mark writes a letter to Nicole letting her know everything that happened. Kath is there with Mark. All the characters that you've ever known are there, like, having fun, being, like, together. I almost forgot to mention the piano club that Mark and Kath join, or Mark and Kath, sorry. I mean, technically she joins to watch Mark, but it's Mark and Nicole join because Mark and Nicole want to connect through that music again. They realize that they can both play this piece, but Mark can only play the beginning while Nicole can play the whole thing and the ending. It is because it is her song, Now, how Mark knows that, again, I'll talk about later, but the piano club is important because it's the first step towards them believing that they can move past their traumas. Where Mark continues, while Nicole gives up, she doesn't actually join the piano club, which has its own host of characters like Carlos and Elise. I forgot his name. I really liked him in the first part, and he kind of like bled into obscurity in the other parts, but he liked Elise, and it was always for Elise, and he was learning to play to impress her, and I liked that guy. Anyway, and Sam was cool too. I liked like all the characters in the club. They felt very like inviting and like what could happen if you don't give up, right? If you keep trying, there's a community out there for you, a family, friends. It felt very important that I'm glad I remembered it so I don't leave it out. Anyway, with all that, we come to, again, prom. Yep, that's what I was talking about, going back to prom with everybody there. Everybody wasn't just there. You interact with them, you talk with them in like ways that feels important. That's kind of like this, it lets you know this is the big finale almost. And once there, Louise has been talking to Mark a little bit more about like what their deja vu might mean. She comes up with this theory that there are like ripples dancing kind of like through the rain, that the rain is triggering these like seismic events like close to the ruination, and that it's dangerous, right? And to make sure that, nobody's really left unattended because they're not fully sure what these moments of deja vu could mean. Like when Mark saw Sophia's grandmother, and Sophia's grandmother said it's all your fault, the ideas of trauma and like reconnection, this, that, and the other thing. It all kind of led to prom being like these characters still have to have fun. However, they have to realize that there is a little bit more at stake here. And this is the part of the game where I said to myself, I almost feel like it would be better if there wasn't like some weird twist. Because the storytelling and the character connections were good enough where I was like, I almost feel like this is bogging the experience. Where I almost feel like, why do Mark and Louise almost feel like this is on their shoulders to fix when they're just like two high schoolers who have no idea what else is going on, right? They almost bypass it in comparison for just focusing on other things to do. And it feels a little weird when it's like, yeah, but isn't this like incredibly insane? Like, why aren't you focusing on it a little bit more? It was kind of, and still is kind of, one of my like little gripes about the game is that instance where it's like, man, they really just treat this like it's whatever, right? Now, at prom, again, you talk to a lot of people, and like Mark is very hopeful that Nicole will be there. Much to his pleasure, Nicole does show up. She's cut her hair, and she's red as no. So they dance, they talk, they kind of come to terms with like apologizing to each other and realizing that they both have a lot of, emotional baggage that they are carrying and a lot of trauma that they refuse to let go of. So they talk about doing it together, right? Being together and getting through that trauma together. It is a very nice moment. It's very sweet. And before I continue talking, it really showcased one of my biggest like issues with the game. For me personally, trying to record it, that game is so unbelievably loud at times. I don't have a mixer, right? Where I normally just lower the volume and like the master volume very low. I had this at 40, I believe, for prom, and there were rain sound effects that were just so loud that I felt like I had to lean forward in the mic and like almost like raise like my tone and almost like yell into the mic in order for it to be louder than the rain and like some of the music. And I never wanted to lower it too much because this game's music is so important. Not just like the piano and like the way that like there were mini games where you play and rhythm and this, that, and the other thing. It's more important than the gameplay that you understand and can hear the music. It is one of the things that carries this game. But the sound effects are so loud and so like, hey, you're on top of the school roof and there's cars flying by, right? That's what it would sound like. but it's repeated over and over and over and over and over again with the same sounds that it almost like drowned out like the music, that it almost drowned out like my idea of what the characters would sound like while they're talking, because I could just hear the car. I could just hear like the rooster like making noise in the morning. I could just like get lost in the music if it wasn't for these additional sound effects that were just so loud and so weirdly placed too sometimes that it's one of my actual criticisms with the game is like that could have been diluted or like cut out in some instances to make room for the music, to make room for these character moments. Now, I understand that you needed to hear the rain during the prom scene because you realize that Kath is not there. The entire time I had been worried about Kath and I had been wondering, and at prom, right before essentially Mark meets Nicole, Kath admits that she has something that she wants to tell Mark after it's all said and done, and to save the last dance for her. And when the last dance happens, you know, everyone's calling out for Kath, and they're wondering where she is, and you realize that her parents and her sibling are there. Now, this all brings up a ton of red flags, and to make a long story short, Mark connects that, you know, she can't be left alone in the rain because that's what they think is causing these disturbances and these awful things to happen. So, in a rush, he goes out there looking for her, and you get quite possibly the moment that defines the rest of the game. You find her. You find Kath. She is at a bus stop. She's lost a bit of like accessories from her prom dress, and it reveals all of the burn marks and all of the like bruises and harm that has been done to her because of her abusive family. And it's such an eye-opener where you've thought it in the back of your mind. You're like, Kath is going through some things because she's brought up her family before and you've seen her brother take her away before, where it's obvious that she wants to spend time with her friends because family life is not so good, which makes it only more impactful when you finally see what she's been going through and you realize that, yeah, Mark and Riddell just left her alone to suffer in that, while they chased their own dreams and their own forms of wellness in a way. And just seeing Kath like that is so heartbreaking, and Mark realizing it. And you see how happy he is to find her. And when they start moving towards each other, you know something's wrong. Then the lights show up, and then Mark's face drops, and you realize they're on a highway. And the zenith point of the game is that Kath is hit by that truck on that highway, and she is killed in front of Mark. It is impactful, it is scary, and the game treats it in almost like the most malicious way possible, which is it cuts away from prom, and you are just at Kath's funeral. And the entire time you're wondering, like, you know, did something happen? What else is going on? And you talk to everybody there, and they offer their condolences and, like, their experiences with Kath. And one of the most painful moments is when Riddell is there. And you talk to Riddell, and he's just so sorry for not being there as much as he should have been. And you walk up to Kath's picture, and it is solidified. You realize Kath is dead. The game is not going to pull something where it's like, oh, like, you know, actually everything's fine. This isn't her funeral, or like something happened, or she was just injured or something, and you're at somebody else's funeral, right? No. It is all of the people that you've met that kind of play an important role, where it's Louise, it's Sophia, it's Ryan, it's Riddell, Nicole, you. Even your dad is there. And Mark has to tell him to his face, like, we need to stop pretending, right? We need to accept it, because now he no longer has to just accept that his mom is gone. He has to accept that he saw his best friend die in front of him. And this changes Mark at the end of the game for the first playthrough. it makes Mark much more jaded and much more hateful. And when he and Riddell are talking, because Riddell finishes the movie and he's like, I wanted you both to see it together, Mark goes off on him, telling him, like, you weren't even there, you didn't do this, you left her behind, and it is such a projected, hypocritical sentence that, you know, saying, like, you weren't there. And in reality, it's like, well, Mark, neither were you. You were there at the end, but you weren't there when she needed you, right? And Mark realizes that. And all that pain is just built up. But the wild thing is, the game then takes you through almost years of nothing, where you don't know what happened, and it is Mark and Nicole packing their bags to move together. And Mark finds a cassette amongst his movable items that he takes out and he plugs into, what is it? Like a VHS player, like a tape player, like a recorder. And you can listen to the music. It's like a Strongs like CD, like, you know, one of the bands in the game that's, you know, Luis's boyfriend is the lead singer and like guitarist, I believe. And you can listen to the whole thing, but, you know, I just like played it a little bit and like cut away until a voice comes through it. Kath had recorded over the tape of that cassette because she knew Mark would listen to it. It was like a little gift, but she wanted to put something on there because she was afraid. Kath's last words are placed onto that cassette. And if you remember, she said, I want to have a conversation, save the last dance for me. In this tape, she admits that she might be too scared to tell Mark everything just because of how intense and how scary it is. She might not have the strength to get through it, is essentially what she says. So she records it over that tape as kind of like assurance that, hey, even if I can't tell you in person, I can at least tell you by giving you this. And it is one of the most heartbreaking things that I have ever seen in a video game. It is Kath going through the motions of telling Mark about the abuse at home and that she, despite it all, wants to keep trying. She wants to see her friends grow up and be successful. And all throughout it, you get flashes of what her friends are up to. Riddell's movie career skyrocketing. One of the most hurtful and heart-aching scenes is her talking about how she wants Mark and Nicole to be happy together. You get to see a shot of them married. And all of these things, playing piano and Luis being successful. And you realize that everybody has made it except for her. And it hurts so much because she talks about wanting to try. She talks about, and you realize that it's true, she never wanted to give up. And it's all the more heartbreaking that her life was ripped away from her, even though, out of everyone, she wanted to try the hardest. And the first playthrough ends with Mark booting up a game that he and Kath used to play together. And he only ever beat her once because she let him. And you play it again, you kind of replay that race, and you realize that, yeah, she threw. And Mark realizes this, and he starts to cry. And the game ends. It shows you credits. The game shows you, that's it. Live with the consequences of what happened. Until all the credits have rolled, and the game screen asks, continue. And you hit continue instead of end game, and it immediately loads you into a second playthrough. This is when the game goes from good to phenomenal. It is when you realize, oh, I'm not done. There's more to do. And you go through it thinking, oh, it's gonna be the same thing, right? I just have to make the right decisions this time, and hopefully Mark will give me the ability to do that. That's incorrect. the game is immediately different. It shows you all the same similar things are happening, from Mark needing to rush the slideshow, but instead of with Ryan, it's with Kath. Instead of getting it done, they fail. Instead of Louise being their friend, she's now more like neutral and a little bit more like antagonizing towards them. Sophia isn't even there. But throughout playing, you constantly get these little reminders of things that have already happened. And Mark will look at them and say, well, weren't you supposed to have a chess tournament? Or, weren't you dating a guy from like the Stronks? Or, hey, like, where's Sophia? And this, that, and the other thing, where you realize this isn't just a second playthrough for your chance to save Kath and still get the happy ending. It is Mark going through it as well. You aren't the player as much as Mark is. He is the one going through all of this while you simply guide him and watch. And it makes Mark such a better character. Because through each one, there are so many constants of him still being the same person, but he changes. He does learn. He reacts to things. And it's not always in the right way. And in this go-round, Riddell is far more prominent. Riddell, instead of being successful with the movie, is struggling to get it out. You get another side of Riddell and realize why he is Kath and Mark's friend. Is because even though he's failing, even though he's afraid, they're still there to help him. And one of the things that makes me so happy about the second playthrough of the game is that the characters talk more. Mark is open about the loss of his mother. Kath wants to talk more about what's going on with her, and Riddell is failing. Riddell is actively not making it. And it hurts, because this version of Riddell deserves it. He's so supportive, and he's so nice, and he's so willing to be there, and Mark and Kath just want to be there with him too, and it makes it such a painful experience because you know what's happening. Mark doesn't realize it yet, but you, as the player, realize that Mark is going through these choices that are so similar to what he had to go through before, but you're watching him walk towards the same outcome. But there's always hope. Because Nicole re-enters the story. They connect faster, and the thing that I like more about Playthrough 2 is Playthrough 1 was essentially a full game in itself. It could have ended with Kath's death, and still been a good game. I would have still been like, wow, this game's really good, even great. But there's a few loose ends and a few things that don't make sense. But you can assume maybe it's meant to be ambiguous, but the game says, no, here's more. Where this time around, everything is faster that you haven't yet learned. Everything is condensed, it is quicker until Mark brings up that he's been through this before, he has an epiphany on something. One of them being that he realizes Kate knew Nicole, and yet Kate never talks to her. To which Nicole is like, how did you know that? How did you know I know Nicole? To which he's like, I don't really know, right? It's just that deja vu again, but it's getting worse. These small little tidbits and things that these characters say, it's all because Mark is experiencing the same thing over and over and over again, and he's now just starting to realize it. So when you talk to Louise this time around, you dig into more of, it's not the rain. There's reasons that these ripples are occurring and that these worlds are overlapping. And why is it that Mark is the one who remembers? Why is Nicole even starting to remember? Why does Louise feel like she has deja vu, but only on certain things? Why are they all at the center of it all, right? And you begin to wonder if it's the ruination, if it caused some crazy shift in time, or what's happening. In reality, it did, but there's way more to it. So everything essentially happens kind of in a similar fashion. There's a few differences, like Kath and Riddell are a little bit more involved with the main story. You still get to meet Nicole, but Kath and Riddell kind of like push like a, hey, go talk to her, like thing. And one of the craziest moments in the game is when there's a section of the fair where you and Nicole run around like scaring kids, and you see how many you can scare in comparison to each other. It happened in the first playthrough, and in the second one, about with like 10 seconds left of the game, the mini game, Mark has a vision of him standing on a highway dressed in like his, his Halloween outfit in what he's doing, being, scaring kids. And it's him on the highway, and it's him watching Kath get run over. And it is so frightening. It is so intense of a moment that even Mark says, I have something to tell you. And Nicole's like, I'm here for you. And it's bonding between them through that trauma again and again and again. It's not just Mark losing his mom. It's not just Nicole losing Jake. It is them having the fresh realization that they are losing people constantly in front of them in all of these different timelines. And as time goes through with this one, Ryan's not around. Ryan has disappeared. He's not part of the story. Everything has this eerie, like, something is off, even while I'm going through this second playthrough of this game. Something's still not right. And going through it, I knew there was more than 2 go-throughs. It occurs when they go to prom again. There's far less like conflict between the characters and more so like a focus on like almost going through this in a way that presents the same problems but in a lighter sense. And this time around, when it's time to go find Kath, because that is a constant, Kath just constantly leaves that area. You not only lose Kath, you lose Louise. Nicole tells Mark that they lost Louise. And you go to Louise's grave, or she's missing technically. And all of these things keep culminating into confusion and unawareness into the third and what is technically the final go-round. Is Mark having full conscious realization that he is not just remembering things, but they are memories. And one of the most frightening parts of the third game is that you jump back sooner. You don't even make it to prom in the third. Or you do. But it's just so fast that you jump back to the start of yet another day. And one of the most chilling moments is when Mark pulls out his phone to text Nicole because he feels like he already knows her. It is scary, it is intense, it is a weird moment, and he deletes his message, but then she messages him first and types his name. And they are not supposed to know each other. And then it resets again. And then they text each other and they're trying to figure out what's wrong, and they go find Louise in that timeline, but she's dead in another timeline, and then it resets, and then she's alive in that one. You have to go find her. You have to talk to her, you have to realize what's going on. And she offers the idea, this Louise, who doesn't seem to be too happy with anything, especially Mark and Nicole, you come to the realization that these timelines are collapsing faster and faster and like colliding faster and faster because of Mark and Nicole. Because they're the only two that remember everything between the jumps. They can't be together, or else the world will keep resetting. In order for time to continue, they believe they need to separate. And it comes with a pretty heavy scene of them saying goodbye to each other. And one of the craziest lines is delivered by Nicole, where she says, "We even got married." And she remembers it all. So every timeline isn't just a memory anymore. They are literal lifetimes that they can remember. They remember getting married. They remember being together. They remember Kath's death. All of it. And all these memories keep happening. So even when they separate and time resets, they don't even text each other anymore. But of course, fate has other plans. They meet at the hospital. They make eye contact. And one of the things before the third jump that I should have mentioned previously in the second jump is that Kate is Jake's sister. That is revealed when Kate goes to confront Mark and is like, do you really know who Nicole is? She's someone who clings onto the past. Now, of course, Mark is doing the same. However, Kate warns Mark that it's beyond that it is literal obsession and she will never let him go. And it's a weird moment of realizing that Kate has been important this whole time. Even though you just get like a little scene with her in the first playthrough, now all of a sudden, she's telling Mark everything about how Nicole was around their family and how she wouldn't let go and how it made things harder for Kate. And during the end, the final few jumps, Nicole goes to Kate to apologize, and it is met with varying successes because it's like a different Kate in every different timeline. Sometimes she talks, sometimes she doesn't, sometimes it's outright rejection. And Nicole brings that up to Mark, that she's not sure she can keep doing it through these jumps, but Mark is so fixated on saving Kath, because in every single timeline that they've been in, apparently Kath dies, and he can't let that happen. But one of the things that you begin to notice as the player as you're going through, and they bring it up themselves, but you realize it first, is with every successful jump, the ruination spreads farther and farther. It isn't just certain people being affected by it or a certain location. All of a sudden, the entire world is falling apart. Houses get dilapidated. Everything looks worse. The sky is dark and there's military checkpoints and people just, going without food and needing rations and this, that, and the other thing and shelter. You as the player start doubting if what Mark is doing is right. Because Mark, in all of his glory, connects where these locations are happening. There was a little test that Louise did where if you shined a light at a certain point, the light would waver whenever there was high activity of ruination or the timelines converging, the worlds crashing together. It was an anomaly. And Mark and Nicole go to these locations together and they look each other in the eye and they, connect, essentially. They are together in those locations, emotionally, and I want to even say mentally, because they're all thinking the same thing, right? And whenever they meet up there, and whenever they truly restart the timeline on purpose, it gets worse and worse and worse. And it's so scary because there's so many times when you realize as Mark, would you do the same thing? Most likely, because at this point you're too deep in. And he has his dad talking to him, he has Kath talking to him, he has Riddell talking to him. All of them saying these same things where it's we're scared, please just talk to us. But he keeps leaving and he keeps moving away from them, and it's such a good showing of the theme of the story that it's all been building up to, which is you have to accept things. You can't keep running away from what you have in order to try to get something back. And Nicole starts to faint during the moments of them trying to forcefully reset the timeline, because they believe if they do it in all the hot spots that they don't need to do it anymore. There's no way to physically reset it. They can stop doing this and it will just be the correct quote-unquote timeline. That's what they're hoping. One where they can make all the right choices. But Nicole starts to faint. They start to see the collision of the timelines and thoughts that aren't their own. Nicole sees Mark's thoughts and past, and Mark sees Nicole's thoughts and past, and you get connections on Jake. You get a bit more on Mark's mom, and the words that she always said is you don't understand it now, but you will one day. You have to save her, right? She always says that whenever Kath's in trouble and Mark is trying to run to save her. And during one of these moments, the sky goes red, everything's crazy, and even with Nicole passed out, Mark is still holding her. he's still forcing the eye contact. And it is such a jarring moment of realizing, yeah, Mark is too far gone to really be the same person that he was. He's willing to put Nicole through so much pain and put himself through so much pain in order to do something that might not even work, because he's obsessed with saving at least one person, because he can't save his mother anymore, and Nicole can't save Jake. And it is heart-wrenching. It's scary. It's rough. And with it came something that, you know, if the sound thing was a little bit of an issue for me, that's only because I don't have like a good mixer and I'm not too good with audio and like this, that, and the other thing. You know, that's not necessarily the game's fault. That's my fault for wanting to, you know, record it the way that I did. One of the things about this game that I think is an actual issue, like game-wise, is while I was playing this game, I don't have an amazing PC, by the way. It's not phenomenal. The game would crash. So even though my PC isn't phenomenal, this game isn't exactly chaotic. It's not like so much stuff is happening all the time. Throughout the game, I would get like small crashes, and I wouldn't really talk about it because I would just like reload the game, go to the part, and then like re-record like that scene right before it crashed, and then keep talking and keep going with the new experiences. At the end of this game, like very near the end, it would consistently crash at the scene of the red and sky and Mark holding Nicole, and during the best part of the game when everything is kind of like coming together, the game itself would just stop working. And I had to look up fixes for this and like do a lot of things to it. I had to lower the graphical settings and like, you know, remove some stuff from like the game itself in order to get it to work. And I think that's just this is an indie game, so I can't like fault it too much that it's literally not like perfectly like amazing in terms of like being able to run on everything and everything, or everything and anything rather. It's it just like bogged my experience a little bit when I was so ready to finish the game and experience everything it had to offer, and then it would just stop. Right? It was kind of a buzzkill, and it very much made me sad because I very much do love this game, and for that to happen over and over and over again, especially at the end, it was hard. It was a little rough. So that is probably my one big like oof about the game, like gameplay wise, is that deep in its like workings, there's like some bugs, or there's just something that would make the game freeze, which I've never had on any other game really that I played on my PC. So it was just a little strange. But that being said, like the theme of like constantly having to restart and watching Mark be like essentially like again another person, and we would maybe never get that Mark that we knew back, the one that I started to enjoy in comparison to the first playthrough. It was scary. And there came moments of like, again, like these thoughts that weren't their own, that they were learning about each other, and like them almost digging too much into each other's like past, where the world got to the point where it wasn't just like the ruination and things were bad. It was post-apocalyptically bad. Where it got to the point where Mark didn't even have cell phone connection to Nicole anymore. They couldn't meet up for the final hotspot, and when Mark does get to that final hotspot, it's alone, and Kath disappears in front of him, and it is just a scene that is so utterly powerful of him looking back and forth and closing his eyes and reopening them, and each time he does, he's in a different timeline, watching Kath die over and over and over again. And it goes to this point where they're like in like this little like dugout, almost like a cave with just a fire going. And it is just them talking about what they need to do to survive. And Mark is freaking out. And Kat doesn't understand, and she says one of the best lines in the game. that kind of like brings everything full circle up to that point, is Mark is talking about, like, I can't watch you die. Like, I need to help you. I need to save you. And Kath, even though she's confused, hits him with the line, what if it's not up to you to save me? Before she disappears. And it is the last time that we technically see a restarted Kath. Because the world goes black, and it is just Mark and Nicole's thoughts, and them lost in their own thoughts, wandering, and you get to learn everything that happened. Why? Even more so, why Mark is so, like, buried in his trauma with his mother, is because one of the last things that he ever said to her was, like, you know, I don't care. Right? And he regrets it for the rest of his life. How he fought with his dad over the fact that she was gone. How Mark truly did deep down accept that she was gone, and he was so mad at his dad for it, but he himself started to adopt the same exact things. We saw Nicole struggle with moving on from Jake and wanting to go find him, and how when she was young, it was her piano practice and her song that she wrote for him that he never showed up for. And that's what broke her heart the most. Her fighting with Kate, because while Kate was trying to move on and accept that her brother was gone, Nicole couldn't, and she was forcing almost Kate to help. Hang up these signs, let's go, like, find him, like, why aren't we doing more? Kate couldn't handle it, because she herself had already accepted that her brother was gone, and Nicole dragging it up hurt her, and that caused them to fight, and it caused Nicole's grief to worsen and worsen, until she carried it with her for the rest of her life. And in the realization that they couldn't let go of the past, they couldn't move forward into the future. And that was the final lesson. Is in the darkness, they reset in the darkness, and they're essentially at the beginning of the world, or like this in-between, where it's so abstract and beautiful. And they both find pianos and they both start to play, and you get to play, as the player, their song, right? You get to play, like, what is it, Wedding Day, I believe is what is the name of the song, and it's the one that Mark had practiced in the first playthrough that you got to play. So in the final scene of playing the piano, with the music being so powerful and so impactful and so meaningful, you get to play it. And then they get to not fully connect, but you get the realization of what's been happening the whole time, the timelines converging. You get to see Jake as Mark, and you get to see Mark's mother as Nicole. And it's very interesting, because you would think it would be Mark's mother talking to Mark and Jake talking to Nicole, but it's not. Those two had been looking out for the other parties involved in, like, the grief and trauma that they were going through, that they wanted somebody to help them. They were the thing, like, bringing them together over and over and over again. It was their trauma literally manifesting and binding them together across space and time, which is crazy. So you get a very heartfelt talk about Jake wanting Nicole to move on, and, like, them realizing that they were just kids and there was nothing that they could have done about it. It was all beyond their control. And you aren't in control of everything in your life. And Mark's mother just wanted him to be happy, to grow up and to be successful and happy. But her death really triggered him into being anything but that. And Mark's mother regretted it herself, and Jake regretted it himself, and you realize that it wasn't just Mark and Nicole holding on to regret and grief, it was those that they lost. They regretted it in their final moments, that they couldn't fulfill their dreams, that they couldn't do the things that they wanted to do, that they couldn't make Nicole or Mark respectively happy. And in all the timelines, in every single world, they realized they were the source of their unhappiness. Mark, no matter what, would always grieve his mother, and Nicole, no matter what, would always grieve Jake, but it got to the point of obsession, and the two realized that. And the reason why Mark and Nicole were the only ones who always remembered is because they always held on to their grief. Everything was constant for them. where for other people, not so much. Not saying that others didn't grieve and that others didn't have like things that they regretted. It was more so that Mark and Nicole's like representation of trauma and grief and sadness and depression held on to the point where it crossed dimensions. Right? And that's the big takeaway from the game, is you are allowed to grieve. You are allowed to be sad. Life is hard and things suck, but you are not in control of somebody else's life. You matter in the world. And when you are gone, you affect things more so than you could ever comprehend. And those that get left behind have to move on. They have to accept it at the very least so that they can live their lives. Because you wouldn't want to be affecting them in such a way, right? And when Mark and Nicole finally have the talk with their, Mark talks to Jake, Nicole talks to Mark's mom, they finally come to terms with what has happened and they realize what they need to do. So with one final push, they create the ripples that they talked about before with the timelines in the water, and they're able to meet and talk one last time. And Mark and Nicole have a very deep talk about, they've lived enough lifetimes doing the same thing. Lived enough lifetimes of being together to understand what they really needed to do, which was stop looking back, which was stop holding on to the impossible, and it's to move forward. And when they reset one last time, it is in the final timeline. It is in the correct timeline that we've had little glimpses into, where it's Mark and Riddell running to a train station. And before, when we saw it, it was a little weird and always like, is this deja vu or what is this? But it was the real timeline. It was the one that mattered. It was before all the ripples and everything. And it is Mark saying that he cannot go any further. And he stops Riddell and he tells him about his mother. But in this time, Mark doesn't cling to the past, because that's what gets Kath killed, is that hesitation. That's how they don't make it on time. Is that Mark tells Riddell about his dead mother, when he should have a long time ago. But Mark, knowing now what he needs to do, even if he doesn't retain all the memories anymore, is he has to get there. He has to save Kath. And while it's not up to him to save Kath, it's up to Kath to save Kath. When he gets there and he hugs her and he tells her that he's sorry, that he should have paid more attention, and that he's there for her. It's not, I'm going to save you. It is, I'm going to be there for you. And it's impactful beyond belief. And the message that comes after that. Mark talking about how, maybe it's not about understanding. Maybe it's about misunderstanding. Maybe it's good enough to try. Maybe even if you misunderstand, even if you say something wrong, at least you talked about it. At least you attempted. And it cuts to Nicole at the, flyer for Jake, and she runs after Kate and hugs her and apologizes. And you get this show, essentially, of where these characters go, right? Through school to graduation, you see Ryan and the basketball team. And you see, Louise like studying, and you see people at an apartment, and Mark and Kath growing up because she made it, because Mark made it on time, because Mark didn't hesitate and he focused on what was right in front of him. You see Riddell, and it talks about, it's not just about success. It's not just about happiness. It's about failure. It's about stumbling. It's about moving forward anyway. Because if you just stay there, nothing's going to change and you will never understand. You won't even understand yourself. And the game ends in a way that I think it needed to. It is Mark doing his silly pose in front of the mirror that he did in the first time he played the game, and you got him, dressed up in his uniform. He does that silly little pose, and Kath does her classic, oh ho ho. I'll miss doing that. And she's like, you're going on a date. Mark's like, yep, I hope this one works out, because the others didn't. And it's cut to, sorry, I had to crack my knuckle there. It is, nobody cares. It is to the point, it cuts to a scene of an older Nicole driving in a car. And it cuts back to Mark entering the shop and Nicole sitting in the chair. And it does such a good job of showing like, hey, they're in the same place and they're going on a date. And in my heart, I knew it wasn't with each other. And then it shows Mark sitting across from a character that was barely introduced in the story, but I love that she was there. I believe it's Jessica. They do the same little hair twirl, like animation, right? That they did when they were in high school, when Mark barely talked to her then. And it seems as though Nicole is just talking to, I'm not sure who it is. It might be a stranger, but it might also have been Louise's boyfriend from the first, timeline. I'm not so sure. It kind of looked like him, kind of didn't, but I was like, maybe. Just for fun, just for theorizing and, mixing the batter a bit more and being like, look at how deep it is and, how thick and well thought out and, all these connections. But it doesn't have to even be that. And they look at each other from across their own tables, and the world keeps going. It is such a good moment of, before they would reset, the world whenever they looked at each other for too long. Now, they're free. They can do whatever they want. And while, it would be, a good argument to say, oh man, I wish it did show them, together at the end. Oh, they made it. I, for one, would argue that I think it's actually better that they aren't together, as they've already lived so many lifetimes together, as they've said. They've already lived with each other as much as anyone else can, times 1,000. They've lived lifetimes together. And now it is a new lifetime. It is a new push forward. It's a new future that none of them know what's going to happen in. While that's scary, that's the point. Is that it's new. It's the future. It's not the past. It's not the same thing. And the game ends with two butterflies flying up in the air, because the butterflies that follow them around the entire game, which a little on the nose with butterfly effect, right? It was the souls of Jake and Mark's mother, watching over them, and the two butterflies fly away, and the game ends. Now, I didn't really intend for this to be an hour and a half long summary, but man, I just wanted to talk about the game and how good it was, and it's so amazing. It just the full experience and seeing it all. From the characters, from how they interact with each other, and you get those little, tense moments of realization that, oh, when Mark said this in the first playthrough, it was because he said this in this playthrough, in this timeline, and oh, this, that, and the other thing. Kath seems to, always talk and, raise death flags about herself, and you really see it throughout the first playthrough. And she talks about it more and more through the other playthroughs, that it's man, how did you not see it coming? You get more about Riddell, you get more about Louise, more about Nicole, more about Kate. The characters just carry the game so far and so hard that I love that the first playthrough is almost in itself a tease. It is let's get you to know all these characters, and let's rip them apart through the choices of Mark, right? It is so scary to know what is going to happen. That the ending of the game being a future that's uncertain is almost refreshing. It's so nice. And I can sing this game's praises all day. And again, there's only one part of the game that I really didn't feel was great. And that again was kind of just how the game runs, is it would crash, right? That's really it. And a bit of the sound, but again, that's kind of on me for not having proper equipment and being able to deal with it. If I had to, again, pick out some of the other things about this game that I feel are a little this could have gone somewhere else. Some of the mini games are just kind of filler. I almost feel they didn't really need to exist unless they're going to show up again later. But, I think the most important ones were the piano ones, and that's pretty much it, actually. Like, I very much enjoyed the piano ones. All the other ones just kind of felt like filler, whatever. I think the carnival ones, or the fair ones, are good because it shows, like, oh, like in the first time it was like this. Oh, in the second time it's like this. It's different. Got it, right? Where I think those are good. I would have preferred every time the piano plays is like, maybe, make it easier at certain times, make it harder at certain times, but maybe they didn't want to overload you with so much on the nose, like how important the music is to it, right? And they wanted you to really only play the super important parts. I can understand that. I really do think there were a few characters that could have been touched on a little bit more, and the reason why I am bringing it up, especially right now at the end here, is talking about Sophia and how much I wish there was a little bit more about her. Well, guess what? As I'm recording this, I believe it has been out for 2 days now. There is DLC about this game that supposedly, according to its own description, focuses on Sophia and Mark. So there's a little bit more that happens between the world reset that we know, with Mark saving Kath, or Mark making it to Kath rather, not saving her, and the ending that we know where Mark and Nicole meet in the coffee shop and don't reset the timeline. There's a little bit more that happens in the middle there, and I'm very interested to play that. I'm so interested to play that. But I don't think there's so much else that I can talk about this game, right? It's been almost 2 hours and I've just been rambling for the sake of rambling. I truly think there is so much good in this game. I truly believe there is so much to be had with this experience that I would easily place this in my top 5 visual novels of all time and probably put it at 1. Like, if we're talking about just purely a visual novel standpoint, I think this is one of the greatest. It has so much heart. It has so much care and love put into it. And I haven't even talked about, like, just how well the pixel graphics are integrated into this game and how gorgeous the backgrounds are and how good everything, like, looks and moves, and I love the little bobs of the characters and little animations that they get. It's so nice, and I could tell that this game was crafted with the intent for not only to feel something, not only to feel like sadness or like connect with the characters, but to show you that those who created it felt it as well. It wasn't just writing on a paper. It wasn't just pixels on a screen. It was something that they truly wanted to make. And I really, really think that if you've made it this far and you're still like, man, I don't really know everything about the game with what he's saying, but it sounds crazy, I highly encourage you to just play it, even if I explained everything about it, which I didn't. I'm missing a lot. This is more just a ramble than anything. I just wanted to talk about the game. Man, just go play it. Like, such a treat. And I'm very excited to start that DLC. I very much am. So if I'm here at the end of this summary / review / basically just me talking about how much I love this game, if it wasn't obvious, I love this game. Even with the little, like, nitpicks that I have about it. And, like, it is a little confusing because, the whole story is a little, like, wow, varied, and, like, this piece is over here, this piece is over here. Did you catch this piece? Well, you're not going to understand this piece, and then and this and this and this. And all these little things where it is like, well, why did the ruination happen in the first place? Was it literally just created because, like, Mark's mom died? Was it literally just created because, like, Mark and Nicole couldn't get over their trauma? That's a little increasingly insane. Was it ever really real? Was that just, like, them having the moment of, like, oh, like, if they just took their, like, got their courage up and, like, took a step forward and, like, did what they needed to do in the first place, like, none of that other stuff would have happened, and none of that other stuff is real. No, it's all real, as they explained, and like having the memories and everything and like living all those timelines, the game isn't just like, oh, well, 99% of the game isn't real. No. It gets a little confusing with, why is Mark's mother and why is Jake just like a spirit? Why does that exist? Why hasn't that happened with anybody else? Why are the timelines really just smashing together until they get it right? Maybe there's like an explanation for that just escaped me while I was busy crying my eyes out at the ending. But even then, it's just so powerful. It's such a good game that I found at a time and beat and really got into the nitty gritty, right? That it just worked out, I think, in the best way possible, which I did take a long break from this game. Like, I think about like half a year to like 7 months. I just didn't play it for a while. I had a lot going on and like this, that, and the other thing, yada, yada, make every excuse under the sun, blah, blah, blah. But in doing so, I think I found this game at such a good time when I could understand it, or at least try and decipher it myself and derive some meaning out of it. With all that said, though, it's like, man, I could talk all day about how much I love Kath and like my goat Ryan and like this, that, and the other thing, and I'm sure there's other characters that I forgot and plot points that I missed, but this game is just such a treat, and I'm no professional at reviews, so when I'm plugging it into the number machine, which is what everybody really cares about, right? They're like, oh, well, shut up. What do you give the game? I would give it a 9 out of 10. I wouldn't go so far as 9.5. I wouldn't go so far as 10. I do not believe that the game is perfect. But for what it is one of my favorites. I believe that for a visual novel type game, that yes, it is probably my favorite visual novel that I've ever played. So in that aspect, like bias aspect, yeah, 10 out of 10. But in terms of an overall video game and an overall experience, it is close to perfect. Like, I wouldn't even be upset if it was like 9.5 if somebody was like, oh, well, just, I would personally give it a 9.5. I'd be like, yeah, I'd probably agree with you actually. But like, for how I'm feeling right now, definitely a 9 out of 10. It is such a journey. It is such a treat. And it is a little bit of a slog in the beginning if you're unsure, like, exactly what's going to happen. And, like, you're wondering where it's all going to lead. Is it just going to be the same thing? Because I have a big gripe with games that force you to play the same game again in order to get a different ending. But in this game, the first ending you get isn't an ending. The game just continues. That's what I like about it. In comparison to games where it's like, I play the whole game, and then it's like, did you collect all 15 black grimoires? No, actually, I didn't. Then the game was like, well, go back and collect all 15 to get the true ending, and then play it on the next hardest difficulty to get a 1-minute cutscene that doesn't matter. I don't like when games do that. If I can't beat your game in one go, why am I playing it? Right? Like, oh, because it's so good, you're gonna play it again. Well, let's be honest here. No, it probably is not. But two, if you're forcing me to do that, I just don't enjoy it as much. Now, if I missed some things and it's my fault, or like I made the wrong decision, or I chose like the bad ending, like without really knowing it, but my decisions led up to like an ending that I wouldn't want, that's different. Then that's on me. But if you literally couldn't get like something, like let's say out of those 15 black grimoires, you can only get 10, and 5 of them are hidden until after you beat the game, in which case you have to go back and reload here and like do this. No, I don't like to do that. I don't. Because if I wanted to replay your game, I would just replay your game. You don't need to force me to replay your game. Then that's just a little weird. But if you add things that are entirely different, and things that just completely and utterly change the narrative, just like this game did, because again, it doesn't give you an ending. It gives you a continuation. The point of the game is that you believe it ends, but it continues because you're not done playing it. That's different. And I think it does it in such a good way, where you're continuing. There's more to it. You know it's not just going to be the same thing. I like that the second playthrough is more rapid. I like that the third goes even faster and gets crazier and crazier. I love how the game presents its story, and I love how it plays out. It's just, as a video game, I didn't get to do much playing of a game, if you know what I mean. It's mainly just walk left or right simulator and hit the spacebar button while people are talking, because you're just reading what they're saying. I do, again, like the mini games, yeah, I could take them or leave them. I understand it's like, oh, we gotta throw some game into our game here. But I almost feel like it kind of just muddied up some of the parts, where it's like some of these mini games just are here for the sake of being here, right? I don't really care for them. Some of them were cute and some of them were fun, but for the most part, I just wanted to keep getting to the story, But be that as it may, it's part of the experience. And I don't think it's bad, necessarily, right? So I do think a 9 out of a 10 is just for this game that I believe is extraordinary. It just falls short a few times. But in a game where, time is part of the main theme, I feel like the game taking that time away from me and putting in like moments to just extend that time for, I'm essentially getting less story out of. It's a little and some of the mini games, again, important. Like I think like the fair and the piano were amazing. But if you held a gun to my head and you said, say something good about the like bus ride mini game where you collect change with Kath, I'd be like, I don't know, the sprites were cute, I guess. Like, but that was my least favorite mini game in the game. I would take the getting food with Sophia minigame over that one, and that one literally did nothing either. But that's okay, right? At the end of the day, it was all about the experience, and I really think this game pours so much feeling and heart and emotion into things that do need to be talked about and into things that people can relate to, that I can't give it any lower than a 9. I think it's criminal to give this game anything lower than a 9. 8.9 is still jail time, in my opinion, for reviewing this game. I think it's really good. And you know what? Right now, I think I'm going to stop, creaking my chair back and forth and swiveling back and forth and grabbing my, microphone and like talking really bad and having to edit this later. Holy moly. I'm going to leave it right here with the jankest explanation of a game possibly ever, and barely even a deep dive, because this was so scattered and like I left out so many things, and I could make a whole video about Kath probably, but I'm not gonna, because that would take forever. This is already taking so long. Again, at the time of me recording this, the DLC's already been out for 2 days and I want to play it, man. So I'm going to leave this one here, and you know what I'm going to do? Right after I close this, edit it and not play the DLC. But after that, I'm playing that DLC and I'm uploading it, man. I'm so very excited. And it's funny that it came out like now, right? Right as soon as I do decide to finish the game. So, everything that I just said included, and everything else that I haven't as well. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a great, wonderful rest of your day. And I will see you all next time, most likely in the DLC for this game. So bye-bye now.